The security guard had already grabbed the young woman by the arm when the old billionaire dropped his glass. It shattered across the marble floor. For one breathless second, the entire ballroom went silent. "Say that name again," Walter Harrington whispered. Standing beneath the cold crystal lights, Lily Carter looked painfully out of place among the silk gowns and black tuxedos. Her faded waitress uniform was still damp from the rain, her shoes were worn at the toes, and a small canvas backpack hung from one shoulder. The guard's fingers tightened around her sleeve, but she did not pull away. Across the room, Adrian Harrington, the billionaire's only grandson, stared at her with a smile that had suddenly disappeared. Only moments earlier, he had been laughing. The Harrington Foundation's annual gala occupied the grand ballroom of the most expensive hotel in Chicago. Investors, politicians, and television cameras had gathered to celebrate the reopening of St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, a project Adrian had promised would secure his place as the future head of the family empire. Lily had not been invited. She had entered through the service hallway after delivering a box of donated books from the small diner where she worked nights. When she accidentally stepped into the ballroom, 2 guards immediately moved toward her. Then she saw the enormous portrait hanging behind the stage. It showed a young woman in a pale blue coat standing beside Walter Harrington nearly 40 years earlier. No plaque identified her. No name appeared in the gala program. Guests had been guessing her identity all evening. Adrian noticed Lily staring. He turned toward his wealthy friends and raised his champagne glass. "Let her look," he said. "Maybe she recognizes expensive paintings." A few guests laughed. Lily lowered her eyes, but Adrian walked closer, enjoying the attention. "No one here knows who that woman is," he continued. "Not the board, not the journalists, not even our family historians." Lily looked at the portrait again. The woman's gentle face seemed strangely familiar. More familiar than it should have been. Adrian tilted his head, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "If you know who she is, I'll marry you." The room erupted in laughter. Lily's cheeks burned. She could feel hundreds of eyes measuring her cheap clothes, her wet hair, and the crack in the sole of her left shoe. She could have walked away. Instead, she slowly removed her canvas backpack and opened it. Inside was an old blue book held together with faded thread. Its corners were soft from years of use, and a small silver key was tied to its spine. Lily touched the cover as though gathering courage from it. Then she looked directly at Adrian. "Her name was Evelyn Rose," she said. The laughter died instantly. Walter Harrington's hand began to tremble. Adrian's face hardened. "That name means nothing." "It meant something to her," Lily replied quietly. "She wrote it inside this book." Walter pushed himself away from the table so quickly that his chair fell backward. The 80-year-old billionaire crossed the ballroom with tears gathering in his eyes. When he reached Lily, he did not look at her face. He stared at the old blue book. "No," he breathed. "That book burned with the house." Lily tightened her fingers around it. Walter finally looked up at her, his voice breaking beneath the weight of 4 silent decades. "Where did you get Evelyn's diary?" Before Lily could answer, Adrian saw the silver key tied to the spine. And for the first time in his life, the young heir looked afraid. Lily had learned early that the world rarely stopped for people who were grieving. At 6 every morning, she unlocked the side door of Miller's Diner and began wiping tables before the first customers arrived. By noon, her hands smelled of coffee and disinfectant. By midnight, after her second job cleaning offices, her feet were swollen inside the same worn shoes she had worn into the Harrington Gala. She lived in a narrow apartment above a laundromat with pipes that groaned through the walls. The refrigerator held more unpaid bills than food, and on cold nights, Lily slept in her coat because the heater only worked when it wanted to. Still, the old blue book was always kept dry. It had belonged to the woman who raised her. Her grandmother, Margaret Carter, had never spoken much about her youth. She had worked as a hospital nurse, saved every dollar she could, and raised Lily after Lily's mother disappeared when she was 3. Margaret had been strict about only one thing. "Never lose this book," she had told Lily. "What's inside it?" "A promise I was too afraid to keep." Lily had been 13 when she first noticed that the name Evelyn Rose was written beneath Margaret's signature on the first page. When she asked about it, her grandmother closed the cover and stared out the window for a long time. Then she said, "Some names are buried because powerful people are afraid of what they remember." Years later, as Margaret lay dying in a charity hospital, she pressed the diary and the silver key into Lily's hands. "Find Walter Harrington," she whispered. Lily thought the medication had confused her. The Harrington family owned buildings, hotels, hospitals, and half the skyline. People like them did not know women like Margaret Carter. But her grandmother's grip tightened. "Tell him Evelyn kept her promise." Those were the last clear words she ever spoke. After Margaret's funeral, Lily found several pages missing from the middle of the diary. The remaining entries were filled with fragments about a fire, a hospital basement, and a young man named Walter who had sworn he would return. Lily spent 2 years trying to contact the Harrington family. Every letter came back unanswered. Every phone call ended with an assistant. Every visit to their offices ended at the security desk. So when the diner owner asked her to deliver donated books to the foundation gala, Lily saw it as her only chance. She had not entered the ballroom to embarrass Adrian Harrington. She had gone there to fulfill the promise of a dying woman. Now, sitting alone in a hotel service room while security waited outside, Lily held the diary against her chest. Through the closed door, she could hear Adrian arguing with his grandfather. "She could have stolen it," Adrian said. Walter's answer was low but firm. "No one could know that name." The door opened. Walter Harrington entered without his cane. He looked older than he had beneath the ballroom lights. His eyes stayed fixed on the book. "Margaret Carter," he said. "Was she your grandmother?" Lily nodded. Walter closed his eyes as if the answer had struck him. Then he whispered, "Margaret Carter died 40 years ago." Lily slowly opened the diary to its final page. "No," she said. "But Evelyn Rose did." Adrian stared at Lily as if she had just confessed to a crime. "What does that mean?" he demanded. Lily did not answer immediately. She turned the final page of the blue diary toward Walter. The handwriting there was faint, almost erased by time, but the words were still visible. "Margaret Carter is the name I must use now. Evelyn Rose can never exist again." Walter lowered himself into the nearest chair. For several seconds, he seemed unable to breathe. Adrian snatched the diary from Lily's hands. "This proves nothing," he said. "Anyone could have written this." Walter reached for the book, but Adrian held it away. The young heir had spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Business partners wanted contracts. Reporters wanted scandals. Strangers wanted photographs, money, or access to the Harrington name. To him, Lily was simply another person who had found a clever way through the door. He looked at her worn uniform and cracked shoes with open contempt. "How much?" Lily's face tightened. "I didn't come for money." "They all say that first." Walter's voice was sharp. "Enough, Adrian." But Adrian was no longer listening. He opened the door and ordered the guards to bring Lily back into the ballroom. Walter tried to stop him, but his grandson insisted that the matter should be settled in front of the board. Minutes later, Lily once again stood beneath the crystal lights. The guests had not left. Whispers moved through the room like cold wind. Adrian stepped onto the stage with the diary in his hand. "This woman claims her grandmother was Evelyn Rose," he announced. "A woman connected to my family 4 decades ago." Lily felt every eye return to her. Some guests looked curious. Others looked amused. A few raised their phones. Adrian held up the blue book. "She also claims this is Evelyn's diary. Yet there are missing pages, no official records, and no living witness who can confirm her story." Walter stood near the stage, pale and silent. Lily could have defended herself. She could have told them about the letters, the hospital entries, or the nights her grandmother woke screaming about smoke. Instead, she remained calm. "I only promised to deliver the book," she said. Adrian leaned closer. And the silver key? Lily looked at the small key tied to the spine. My grandmother said Walter would know what it opened. Adrian laughed, but the sound was forced. He turned to his grandfather. Do you? Walter stared at the key. Before he could answer, a gray-haired board member stepped forward. His name was Charles Vane, the Harrington family attorney. He examined Lily with narrowed eyes. There was an Evelyn Rose, he said slowly. She was accused of stealing from the Harrington estate before the fire. A murmur swept through the room. Lily's hands went cold. Adrian's expression sharpened with satisfaction. So this is not a lost love story, he said. It is the granddaughter of a thief looking for payment. Walter suddenly struck his cane against the marble floor. She was not a thief. The room fell silent again. Charles turned toward him. Then tell them the truth. Walter opened his mouth, but no words came. Lily watched the old billionaire struggle beneath the weight of his own memory. She understood then that he was not simply hiding a secret. He was terrified of it. Adrian handed the diary to a guard. Remove her from the hotel. The guard stepped toward Lily. She lifted her backpack without resistance, then paused beside the large portrait. For the first time, she noticed a tiny mark painted near the woman's left hand, 3 small roses surrounding a keyhole. It was the same symbol carved into the silver key. Lily turned toward Walter. This painting isn't a portrait, she said quietly. It's a door. And somewhere behind the canvas, something clicked. The sound came from behind the portrait. Not loud. Just a faint metallic click that somehow silenced the entire ballroom. Lily stepped closer to the canvas. The 3 painted roses near Evelyn's hand were almost invisible beneath the gold frame, but now she could see a narrow opening at their center. A keyhole. Adrian moved between her and the painting. This has gone far enough. Lily raised the silver key. Then why does this fit? Before Adrian could stop her, Walter placed a trembling hand on his grandson's shoulder. Let her try. The old billionaire's voice was barely audible, but no one questioned him. Adrian stepped aside. Lily inserted the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lock turned with a deep mechanical sound. The portrait shifted away from the wall by less than an inch. Several guests gasped. Behind the painting was a steel compartment built directly into the marble. Its surface was dark with age, untouched for decades. No handle was visible, only a small circular plate and 3 brass switches shaped like roses. Charles Vane, the family attorney, hurried forward. This could contain private legal property. She cannot open it. Lily studied the compartment. Her grandmother's diary had mentioned roses more than once, though the passages had never made sense to her. The first for the night we met. The second for the promise. The third for the life we saved. Lily pressed the roses in that order. Nothing happened. Adrian gave a cold laugh. The performance is over. But Lily looked at the old portrait again. Evelyn was painted wearing a pale blue coat. One hand rested over her heart. The other pointed subtly toward the bottom of the frame, where the year of the painting appeared in small gold numbers. 1979. Lily remembered a line from the diary. When memory fails, begin with the year everything burned. She returned to the compartment and turned the circular plate until the numbers aligned, 1979. The steel door opened. The ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Inside was not jewelry. There were no bundles of money or valuable documents. There was a small reel of film, a stack of hospital records, an envelope bearing Walter Harrington's name, and a photograph of 2 young women standing outside St. Catherine's Hospital. One was Evelyn Rose. The other was Margaret Carter. They were identical. Walter took the photograph with shaking hands. Twins, Lily whispered. His knees nearly gave way. Charles reached for the hospital records, but Lily saw something else first, a folded newspaper clipping dated the night of the fire. The headline reported that Evelyn Rose, a suspected thief, had died inside the Harrington estate. Beneath it was an unsigned confession. I started the fire. Evelyn discovered the false hospital accounts and threatened to expose them. Margaret took her sister's identity so the evidence would survive. Lily's eyes moved to the bottom of the page. The confession was signed with two initials. CV. Everyone turned toward Charles Vane. His face had lost all color. "That is a forgery," he said. Walter opened the envelope addressed to him. Inside was a single letter and a photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. As he read, tears fell onto the paper. Adrian stepped closer. "What does it say?" Walter looked at Lily, then at the portrait of the woman he had mourned for 40 years. "Evelyn did die in the fire," he whispered. "But before she died, she saved my daughter." Adrian frowned. "You never had a daughter." Walter turned the photograph over. Written on the back was a name, a date, and the same small rose symbol carved into Lily's key. Walter's voice broke. "I did." Lily stared at the name. It was her mother's. The name on the back of the photograph was Anna Rose Harrington. Lily's mother. Her hands began to shake. All her life, she had known her mother as Anna Carter, a quiet woman with tired eyes who disappeared when Lily was 3. There had been no photographs of Anna's childhood, no birth certificate in the apartment, and no relatives who could explain where she had gone. Only Margaret's answer whenever Lily asked. "Your mother left because staying would have put you in danger." Lily had always believed it was a gentle lie told to protect an abandoned child. Now Walter Harrington was staring at the same photograph as if his entire life had split open. "She was born in St. Catherine's Hospital," he said. "Evelyn told me the baby died before I could see her." Charles Vane took a slow step toward the exit. 2 guards immediately blocked his way. Walter opened the letter again. His voice trembled as he read the words Evelyn had written on the night of the fire. "Charles discovered our daughter survived. He has been stealing from the hospital fund, and he knows I have the records. If I give Anna to you now, he will find her. Margaret will take my name, hide the child, and wait until Charles no longer has the power to hurt her." Adrian looked toward the attorney who had advised his family for most of his life. "You knew she was alive?" Charles said nothing. The old film reel was taken to the ballroom's projection booth. Minutes later, grainy images flickered across the white wall. They showed Evelyn and Margaret inside a hospital records room, copying ledgers that proved money intended for sick children had been diverted through companies controlled by Charles's father. Then Evelyn appeared alone before the camera. She wore the same pale blue coat from the portrait. "If Walter ever sees this," she said through the crackling recording, "tell him I did not leave because I stopped loving him." Walter covered his mouth. On the screen, Evelyn held up the blue diary. "When we were young, Walter found Margaret and me sleeping in a hospital laundry room. We had not eaten in 2 days. He gave us his coat, his dinner, and the money in his pocket. He did not even ask our names." Lily looked at Walter. That was the small act her grandmother had spoken about. At the time, Walter had not been a billionaire. He had been a 19-year-old medical volunteer with one good coat and barely enough money for the bus home. His kindness had cost him almost nothing. But Evelyn never forgot it. Years later, when false records threatened to destroy the hospital Walter dreamed of building, she risked everything to preserve the truth. Margaret then sacrificed her own name and spent decades hiding Anna from the people who wanted the evidence erased. The film ended with Evelyn tying the silver key to the diary. "One day, a girl from our family will return this," she said. "Do not judge her by what she wears. Ask what she was brave enough to carry." The screen went dark. No one in the ballroom moved. Lily finally understood why Margaret had lived in poverty despite possessing evidence that could have made her wealthy. She had not been waiting for a reward. She had been waiting until Lily was strong enough to survive the truth. Walter approached her slowly. "I searched for Evelyn," he said. "But I never searched for Margaret." She made sure you wouldn't, Lily replied. She believed Charles was watching you. Adrian lowered his eyes. Only an hour earlier, he had mocked Lily's uniform, her shoes, and the backpack containing the history his family had failed to protect. "Where is your mother now?" Walter asked. Lily reached into a hidden pocket inside the backpack and removed one final envelope. "My grandmother told me to open this only after you believed me." Inside was a recent photograph. Anna Carter stood outside a small coastal nursing home, older now, but unmistakably the baby from Walter's photograph. Beneath it, Margaret had written an address. Walter pressed the picture against his chest. "She's alive." Lily nodded, tears finally slipping down her face. "She's been waiting to know whether it's safe to come home." 3 weeks later, Walter Harrington stood at the entrance of a small nursing home on the coast of Maine. The ocean wind pulled at his dark overcoat, and for the first time in decades, he looked less like a billionaire than an old man afraid of being forgiven. Lily stood beside him. Adrian waited a few steps behind, carrying the blue diary in both hands. Inside, Anna Carter sat near a window overlooking the gray water. Her hair had turned silver, and illness had weakened her body, but when Walter entered the room, her eyes changed. He stopped in the doorway. "Anna?" She studied his face for a long moment. Then she whispered, "You have Evelyn's eyes when you're afraid." Walter crossed the room slowly and knelt beside her chair. He had prepared speeches, apologies, and explanations during the flight, but none of them survived the sight of his daughter. "I should have found you." Anna placed a hand over his. "You were meant to find the truth. Margaret was meant to keep me alive." Walter lowered his head, and Anna held him while he wept. Adrian turned away, ashamed of how quickly he had judged Lily on the night of the gala. Wealth had taught him how to recognize expensive things, but not valuable people. Back in Chicago, Charles Vane was removed from every position connected to the Harrington family. The hospital records were turned over to investigators, and the stolen funds were returned to St. Catherine's with decades of interest. Walter did not allow the family's public relations team to hide the scandal. He stood before the same ballroom where Lily had been mocked and told the truth. He spoke of Evelyn's courage, Margaret's sacrifice, and the daughter he had lost because fear had been stronger than honesty. Then he called Lily onto the stage. This time, she did not wear a waitress uniform. But she still wore the same old shoes. Walter offered her a position on the board of the Harrington Foundation, along with a scholarship to finish the social work degree she had abandoned after her grandmother became ill. Lily accepted the scholarship. She refused the board seat. "I don't know how to run an empire," she said. "But I know what it feels like when no one opens the door." So Walter gave her something better. He placed her in charge of a new program at St. Catherine's for children and families who had been ignored because they lacked money, influence, or the right last name. Adrian found her weeks later in the hospital library, arranging donated books on a shelf. For once, he came without an audience. "I owe you an apology. You owe a lot of people one." He nodded. "I'm starting with you." Lily looked at him and saw something different, not humility yet, but the beginning of it. Adrian glanced down at her worn shoes. "I also made a promise in that ballroom." Lily almost smiled. "You made a joke. It wasn't a very good one." "No," she said. "It wasn't." He did not ask her to marry him. Not then. Instead, he volunteered at the hospital every Saturday. He served meals, carried boxes, and learned the names of people he once would have walked past. Months later, Anna returned to Chicago. Walter restored Evelyn's name, Margaret's honor, and the true history of St. Catherine's Hospital. The large portrait remained in the ballroom, but a new plaque was placed beneath it. It did not mention wealth. It read, "Evelyn Rose and Margaret Carter, two women who protected the truth when powerful men would not." One evening, Adrian found Lily standing before the portrait with the blue diary against her heart. This time, he did not make a wager. He simply held out his hand. "Would you let me know you properly?" Lily looked at the man he had been, then at the man he was trying to become. She placed her hand in his. one honest step at a time. Because sometimes, a fortune cannot save a family. Sometimes, it takes a poor woman carrying an old book, a forgotten promise, and the courage to speak one name. Never judge a person by the door they entered through. They may be carrying the truth that opens yours. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes kindness is never wasted. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that remind us how one small act can change a life forever.